Hi, Martin.
Hi, how are you? I think you're muted.
Good, and you?
I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. Um, Hi, John. I think
Yeah, I
we
think
are not.
he's there. Yeah.
Yeah. We quickly have a look. Any pull requests?
Apologies for the lack of PR. I think I'll put up a few at once.
Yeah. I will merge them after the meeting. Don't worry. I think Kamil is out today,
Okay.
but don't worry. Um, I've prepared a couple of things.
Yeah, I saw you put some things, a few items on the agenda.
Yeah. Uh, Give it 2 more minutes, and
Sure.
if we are all, then we just start.
Yeah. I was also wondering, because I think there was a PR up with the spec at some point, and it was
Yes, we.
merged, but I couldn't find the branches. I wasn't sure where it ended up.
I show you because we formalized now everything. So we put
Okay.
the spec part in a separate repository, which is Composite Schemas spec. But
That makes sense.
I walk you all through and
Yeah.
show you all what we did, and then it's also easier how we can all work now around this. Um,
Yeah.
as I said, we don't announce it yet, so it's kind of hidden. It's public for us all available, but we are not pushing anyone into it.
No, no, but it might be good. I mean, maybe that's too soon, but if we have something to talk about during the next primary meeting,
Yeah,
I think that's in 2 weeks. So
yeah.
might be good to have something to share if that's
Yes.
realistic.
So I worked with Benji. I think the introduction to the spec, the overview is quite finished. You can have a look. So basically, I will show you in a minute, and I think you will be happy with it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe the meeting is not the right time to go over it in detail, but
No, no, no. But just quickly, and then you.
yeah,
I think all the points and like yeah, I will show you. Just wait
sounds good.
for if somebody else wants to join, and then we can start. 1 more minute, and then we go.
This your office, or do you work from like a co-working space? Or
That yeah. Sometimes it's good to get out from home. So.
yeah, I used to do that more often, but now that I have sort of other things to get me out of the house during the week, most of the writing and programming I do at home.
Yeah, yeah. I envy you a bit about the school thing. I mean, I have kids. That's why there's no space for it. But like I used to like teaching,
Yeah,
um, and yeah, it's also an age where they just take things up without fighting too much.
well, I wouldn't say that, but
Yeah,
no,
but
I
compared
really
to
enjoy
when
it.
they're 16 or 17.
Yeah, sure. There's definitely a difference in level of interest and motivation. I think that sort of decreases with the years, at least in our
Yeah.
school system for most people.
Okay, let's start. Um, yeah, let me remind you, by being here, we all agree to the GraphQL Spec membership agreement. We always have to say that.
Yeah,
Um, so let's introduce ourselves. I'm Michael Stipe. I'm one of the GraphQL TSCs, and I'm the host today.
I'm
Go ahead, Mark.
Martin. I work for Apollo, and I was involved in the creation of Apollo Federation, and I've been involved in that for quite a few years by now.
Awesome.
And I'm John. I'm just joining along for the ride. I also have some experience I forgot to mention last time with using the node pattern that we were talking about last time, building a open source library.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yep.
it's good. I mean, we all know each other, but it's always good when people look at the recordings.
Yeah, maybe we should prepare like a different fact about ourselves every week.
Yes. Okay,
Keep
let
things
me.
interesting.
So we have a couple of agenda items too. One is about terms, and that has to do like, let me just get this out of the way. So let's start with the first thing. We moved the spec text that we had into a repository called Composite Schemas spec.
Yeah.
So we can actually work with pull requests. And I said, like, also you can go ahead if you want to raise any pull requests or issues. We can do that here. Like the moment we have here already a pull request that what I actually discussed or question or was a question by Carol. So we can get the work that we are actually doing a bit more organized and also
Sounds good.
asynchronous. At the moment, we started already. I worked with Benji a bit on the revision of the introduction. I can show you that actually. I have it here. And that basically, so what we did is we took your introduction, we took my introduction that we had, and we meshed them. And I think I'm quite happy with it so far. But you can go over it, and if you think there are things that are not unclear or where you don't disagree, just raise them as an issue or pull request. One thing,
definitely. I'll have a look before the next meeting.
Yeah. One thing I made more clear, like I have 4 points now. So explicitness is, I think, worth its own point if you want to go along.
Yeah, I actually forgot which point I originally added that to, but you're right. That was sort of a separate issue.
Yeah. I basically reread what you wrote, and I also had like a couple of points written at the original introduction, and then I started meshing them, and also went over it with Benji as a co-editor here, and we we made it more in a spec language. So that's why we think like subgraph and supergraph are not good terms in the spec language text, because we are basing this on the GraphQL specification, and we're not talking about graphs there, but rather about schemas. And if you think about the specification, it's not about how you actually host this thing or about the service. It's about how you can create a composite schema. That is essentially what the supergraph is. And you have kind of source schemas that are your downstream schemas. If we come, like, it's a very, very neutral language, and the nice aspect around is that it kind of links then nicely with the original GraphQL spec, where we can just look up what is a schema or what is a source schema and things like that. I mean, read through it.
I can definitely see that. I think my worry would be that it might be too neutral, the terminology. So we call them subgraph schemas, for instance, instead of like source schemas here. And I think the reason we use the term subgraph is to emphasize the fact that well, basically the principle of composability here. Like these are not sort of arbitrary schemas that are composed together, but this, well, the federation specification, but I think that's a goal of this specification as well, is to sort of emphasize the use case of designing schemas that are meant to be merged together from the start, And that's why we sort of landed on the term subgraph there, to emphasize the fact that they're part of a larger whole from the start.
Yes. Yeah, we kind of pointed that also out, and read through it. I think it is very in the language of the specification. This subgraph is kind of like we don't use graph in any of the specification texts. Like
that's interesting. Yeah. Now that you mention it, I never realized that.
Is it a goal that we're trying to say that a subgraph or a simple GraphQL schema can't be used independently of the graph, the supergraph?
I mean, they could be used independently if you wanted to, but they're depending on sort of how they're designed, but they're meant to be composed together into a supergraph. I mean, that's how you get a usable API. Like if you look at a single subgraph service in isolation, sort of depending on how you design your schema, it's likely to be an incomplete view of the domain.
Yeah,
sure.
But that's also, it depends on the design. If you craft, for instance, domain services, where you have all the user stuff there and not user divided into several, it could still be a useful thing on its own. Although, like we made the intention clear, like we have this collaborative, right? This section which makes this very clear that this is an effort to by a team to build a single graph out of these subgraphs.
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering if it's a goal that, not only can a subgraph be used independently, but a supergraph could also become its own subgraph.
Exactly.
So it might be too narrow to emphasize the subgraph being only part of a whole instead of being an independently usable thing.
Yes, I think like it could be used on its own, but not like the point is, I think not any GraphQL server could be a subgraph, but a subgraph could potentially be useful on its own if designed in a certain way.
Okay.
Or could also be like, you could also do, if you wanted to do that, I don't know if it's very efficient from a performance factor, because then you have multiple HTTP hops, but this also depends on how you implement that. You could have multiple.
So you're saying that you could have a subgraph that is incompatible with another, so they'd have to be intentionally designed to be compatible with one another.
Yeah, to be compatible and to sort of together define the kind of sort of client schema that you want to expose. So it's really a sort of deliberate design to present sort of a unified view of a domain.
Got it. That makes sense.
I think the other comment is also interesting. It's the idea of composing supergraphs into a larger supergraph. That's definitely something that has come up over the years. And sort of the most recent incarnation of that idea is actually to not go down the path of sort of multiple levels of composition, but instead look at sort of the supergraph as the unit of collaboration and organization. That's sort of where the workflows that allow a team to collaborate on a common graph come together. But then to build mechanisms on top of that allow you to link between these independent supergraphs. And that's probably something that is sort of out of scope of this standardization effort, but it would be really interesting to talk about that in this context as well, I think, because they are sort of they are different models of how you would go ahead and build larger graphs.
Yeah, I guess what was the challenge that you were trying to solve, or rather unable to solve with the super graph?
Well, I mean, the main problem is that we're not just talking about composing schemas. We're actually talking about allowing a client um, to execute queries across multiple systems. So that they're not just the schemas, that they're actual running systems that have to be maintained, that have their own accessibility and authorization rules, their own performance characteristics. So it's not just about merging a schema, it's about allowing clients to query across different systems that are potentially managed by different parts of an organization or even different organizations.
In other words, it's guaranteed they're not going to be compatible in a lot of scenarios.
Well, I mean,
Depends, I would say.
the idea is that like a namespacing mechanism, for instance, allows you to independently evolve these these graphs without conflicts, and also allow you to link between these graphs. So there's a way to sort of traverse across these different graphs without introducing conflicts.
Yeah,
there's also like,
so in other words, if you can't design them together, then you're going to hit some conflicts. So you might need a different technique to support execution across them.
Yeah, I mean, design is one part, but the other is just deployment and management. It's just like which team or which part of an organization is responsible for this part of the graph. And it's and like a super graph is really meant to be a collaborative effort, so everyone sort of contributes to the same graph. You have workflows that guarantee consistency, but it's really hard to get that in place across larger teams or even different organizations. So that's where you need more sort of autonomous graphs that can still link together. At least that's the thinking. That's where we landed.
yeah, it's also like if you think about semantics of IDs or whatever, like to connect two different graphs from two different organizations, like something from GitHub and something from Salesforce, to merge these data, there's a lot of data shifting to do, and this is not in the specification. Like it could be like something that you solve in this subgraph or in this source schema where you do all this rewriting and semantic alignment between these different services. But then this specification is only working with these aligned services, right? You have to have in your teams an aligned understanding what a certain piece of information means. Otherwise, it doesn't go together.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see what you're saying. Out of scope for this. I think that makes sense.
It's like there are other approaches like schema stitching or things like that where you can rewrite data. But this is not it. Yes. Okay, but yeah, so this, like, I'm a bit aligning. So my effort was like aligning it more in the spec language. And if you read the GraphQL specification, this is understandable as well. And I think like a composite schema, like instead of a supergraph, calling it a composite schema is actually the right term, because composite is basically something that is built out of different layers, which I think is a good term, a composite schema.
I think composite schema could work here. I think source schema is the term that seems to.
If you have other ideas,
I'll think about it. Yeah, I mean,
we brainstormed a couple of.
Yeah.
But yeah, like a composite, I like made up of several parts or elements.
Yeah. I mean, it's still, I think, more general than at least what we mean by supergraph, because
yeah,
these design well, not just the design principles, but the composition rules, for instance, they're really meant for services that at least can be deployed independently. Like the fact that we use keys, for instance, to traverse between graphs. If you just compose a local schema together from different schema files, which you might also want to call composite schema, then you wouldn't run into those restrictions. So I think it's it is a little more specific. It's really about services that at least can run independently. If you have to send a GraphQL request to each subgraph in order to execute queries across them.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I'll also continue to think about this, and maybe there's an alternative term that works. Let's continue the discussion on the repository.
Yeah, I think like if you think about supergraph, it's more a made up term. Like it was originally a Facebook term, like the first, but it's made like it works as a marketing term very well, but I think not in a spec. Like the composite schema is more what, like if we find a better term, let's go with it. But for source schema, I agree with you. I had some difficulties to formulate a couple of things, but yeah, read through it and give your feedback. I think overall, like the only so that's also a thing. I put this on a stage 0. It's preliminary, so nobody starts implementing that.
Yeah.
Right. It also says it's active development and can change before. Like this is like the stage 0 drawman. Basically, we are trying, but everything can change.
Yeah.
This makes it also very clear. We're calling that out here. The only thing that we reworked so far, and we are working on other parts now, like is the overview. So this is basically just what I showed you.
Yeah.
Would be good if we can agree on that. And I started now working a bit on this. It's not fleshed out yet, so I will.
I think we haven't discussed that yet, but I think you use entity resolver for what we called Finder. We're not bound to Finder, but I think the problem, like we actually discussed entity resolver internally as well before we landed on Finder, and the main reason for not going with entity resolver was that like a resolver is really part of the implementation of a schema. Like it's not really a part of the definition. So we wanted a term that sort of described semantically what it was doing. Yeah. Like lookup was another one that we considered. But maybe this is another area where we just keep thinking, and maybe someone comes up with something. Just wanted to flag that. I think
Yeah, I'm not very hung up on any of the terms that we have. So we can open an issue.
Yeah.
To find names. I think that's what I actually did with Benji.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Now we can do it much more open. So we discussed a bit. We were also sub-schema. We had more.
Yeah.
We started it on Slack, but
we call them subgraph schemas. But yeah.
That.
Oh, I think you're breaking up.
Yep, I got that too.
Yeah, he froze for a little while before as well.
Composite.
He's back.
You broke up for a bit.
Me?
Yep.
Let me fix that. The Wi-Fi here sometimes not good. Give me a second. Okay. I record that out, or do I have that? Yeah, we have the composite execution schema, which is the annotated schema, and the composite schema at the moment, because like we have actually to fill 3 terms, right?
Yeah.
What you call the API, but in the spec text we are actually never talking about how this is hosted, that there is a transport happening. Like for the spec text, we can keep it very simple in talking about, like we have here, like you could build a composite schema even in memory if you wanted to, and that's kind of what the spec can describe. How this is hosted, and that's over HTTP, gRPC, it's actually not a spec concern.
No, I don't think the transport was the issue, but we wanted to come up with a term that describes sort of the usage. So we consider it like client schema or public schema. The problem with public schema is that you might actually have different graphs. You might have a public and a partner and an internal one.
That's why
public is not a good term.
That's why we didn't choose it. Like that's why we went with like composite schema and composite execution schema as terms for now. But as I said, I'm not throwing up on terms if we find better ones.
I'll think about it. I think execution. I mean, it's a bit close to like an executable schema.
Yeah, it kind of is if you think about it, because like you feed what the execution schema or the supergraph document, how you call it, into a router or into whatever, and it's executable because we have the instructions to how to execute that annotated on the schema. So it is kind of executable. That was his thinking
makes sense.
behind that.
Yeah. I think the worry would be that executable schema is really associated with like a resolver-based model.
No, it doesn't. That's why it's a composite schema. It's within the spec. I mean, we define what it is within this specification.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you like read through it, think about
if you have, I'll think about it. Yeah.
Better terms, like we can put and best we just raise an issue and then discuss. Then everybody can chime in.
Sounds good.
I found that very productive, and this is also like, I mean, we discuss here everything a lot in the meetings, but it also makes it more transparent how we talk about these things.
Yeah.
Yes, that is a bit this. That's also the first topic I want to talk about. Let me quickly switch to a more stable Wi-Fi.
Yep.
I might be 1 second gone. Okay, Wi-Fi. Okay, now I'm back.
All right.
This one is better. Okay, that is the first thing we had on the list.
Yep.
Second thing is source schema validation phases. So I originally started on this journey, but haven't done a lot. But that's essentially where we left off last week. So we had the validate. These are the 3 phases we want to put in. So it's basically validate subgraph, merge subgraphs, and then validate satisfiability. So we have a lot of spec text for validation of the subgraphs. This is still on my plate to sort out which of these algorithms are reusable, which we can use as algorithms for this piece. And then we need a bit of introduction text, what it actually is.
And the reasoning behind it. I think that's like we need the individual rules spelled out, but we also need to make sure sort of the reasoning behind them, like why we basically the design principles behind it.
Then we need some introduction text about the stage at the whole. Like what do we do here? Then we need each rule, and each rule needs to also be spelled out why we think that needs to be validated.
Maybe that
like within the rules
between input and output types, for instance, in how we think about validity.
By the way I work at the moment is because like having some text somewhere around is always good. Like at the moment when I clear one of these chapters, I actually have here this little temp where I just moved stuff in that we at the moment I just moved it out for a second. If we clear one of these things, we can always like move text out into a temp file and then later on decide where we put these things, or if we drop them. That's also at the moment at the moment I think 2 chapters is where I want to put focus a bit on, that we make some progress in that direction. It's really composition and source schema.
That makes sense.
And because this describes a bit the source schema describes a bit the directives and what characteristics such a source schema should have, like in the overall context, where composition, especially the first steps, will outline how we validate and compose these things, right? So these two go a bit together. I don't know how do you want to proceed on that? Should I just move a bit the rules and gather a bit the back text, because I have something from you that's like I always go through both of our notes and kind of
I mean I'd be happy to like elaborate a little bit on the different stages, for instance, but maybe just put in the initial text and then I can open a PR against it.
Okay. Do you have this? Oh wait. Fundamental property. Merging. Okay. What is missing? We in this version of your initial text we didn't have it. I think for the first couple of things, right?
No. The phases weren't really described properly here. I think, and like the way we describe this, obviously, I think there could be a lot better described. But go ahead.
I just put the link for the repository.
Perfect. I'll I mean maybe if you just merge into things that you're that you have a like good idea where they belong currently, and I can just go over the whole thing and open issues and PRs as I come across things.
Important overview that is for me that we are good, because then we can make, I think it's not a big thing, then we can make kind of a check mark on it and just,
Yeah.
okay, these are our principles in which we want to operate.
I think one question on terminology is also the working group is currently called Composite Schemas Working Group.
Yeah.
I think it like that name also started out when the goals were a little more broad. Do we want to use the term federation at all, like in a lowercase
So at the
f
moment,
federation?
at the moment, we agreed to just keep it in a neutral tone and composite schemas, and then at some point when we are further along, decide what it is.
Yeah, because it might also be confusing to introduce other terminology.
It depends on how we phrase a spec. Like, I think federation in essence is more at what we do. Like we describe certain parts that are used in federation, but it's also, you could use it for other kind of product types. Let's have, I'm not too strung up on terms. That's why like I was also always, let's do something together instead of.
Yeah.
So I'm also not bound, like I was never like it has to be fusion or it has to be this. Like let's create something together, and then we decide within the working group what the name possibilities are.
Yeah, and I think that also depends on
sort
of on the audience and on sort of how we want to communicate this once we're at that stage.
We could pick a name that everyone hates.
It's composite schemas.
Well, maybe it is. Yeah.
I do have a question.
No, it was for everyone except at that stage.
I do have a question about the composition section. If you have a second.
Sure.
I've seen it's already filled in with all of these directives, and it seems like a lot of the syntax is borrowed from Apollo. Is the idea that we're going toward Apollo's implementation, or just kind of taking the concepts and trying to shape them into something that more can use?
So the idea that I have in mind, but Martin can correct what he has in mind, is what we specify here is more a core set, but with a more modern take on what Apollo did. Essentially, it's more modernized, kind of with the view of today. Like Apollo has, like Federation has a lot of, I would say, legacy things in it that were done because they had their learnings, like also with how the types were specified, that we had these entities resolvers and stuff like that, which this spec will definitely be compatible. But like, I think what we do now with the entity resolvers and stuff is for me a more modern approach. But you can also
that makes sense. I think the query dot underscore entities entry point, for instance, that's a clear example of something that we've talked about other ways of doing that for a very long time. So I think something like the finder or entity resolver model, I think that makes a lot of sense in the context of this specification. I think one of the sort of starting points for the whole conversation is that we sort of realized that the kind of model we were trying to build was very similar. There are definitely things we can improve here, and there are things we can learn from the thinking that has gone into Fusion, for instance. I think the is directive, for instance, for entity resolvers, I think that's a good example. And the way variables are used to pass information in for requires. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question. I think the compatibility, that's something that we'll have to tackle at some point.
Yeah, but yeah, I thought a bit about that, but
Yeah.
I don't want to like this is in the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not too strong. I think there is a good way to compatible. Also, nobody is saying you are not allowed to use an entities resolver. Like
Yeah.
we're just not specifying it in the spec, but
No.
like we actually.
But we probably need to leave open that possibility, like some way of
Exactly.
specifying a may or a.
Yes, and it's also we basically do that, right, with the entities resolver here. We can even put an example in here. Like we also do it with nodes. You can put it on the node resolver and then and there we could also have an additional spec, okay, like a secondary spec for the entity resolver alone that is like an add-on or something like this.
Yeah.
But this is something for when we have made more progress.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of coming from a place where I have briefly looked at Apollo and was confused, overwhelmed by the amount of things I had to learn in order to implement the system. So I'm sure it is understandable perfectly, and I'm just a newbie, but I do wonder if there are things we can try and focus on that are like conceptually what we require, like what is the entity resolver for, rather than, using entity resolver from Apollo, that kind of thing. I mean, I imagine that's the goal we're shooting for here, but I wanted to check in with the group.
Yeah, I think what Martin and I like, we did some pre-work on it, like, and when we basically put concepts together, like we kind of created a spec that I think is simpler.
Okay.
Because you write GraphQL. You don't have to think about the entity resolver and sending representations in that way. When you design a subgraph, it's now just writing simple resolvers and specifying what you want to have in a very strong way. And I think this removes a lot of complexities. And I mean, there are still complexities in that. If you go into the world of provides, for instance, like there's a provides directive, which makes things more complex to think about. But I think this is for people that have a larger scale and actually want to optimize performance on their system. And then, okay, you have to learn this additional complexity, but you very well can build graphs without using any provides directive or even requires directive if you keep it very simple. So it kind of the like the idea is where I see the spec is that it's very easy to onboard people as long as they keep it simple, and most smaller projects keep it simple. But the moment you get into enterprises where you also want to optimize, like request times, you have the tools to do it.
Yeah, and hopefully a specification will actually help people better understand the model and the reasoning behind it.
Yeah,
I think from our perspective, it's based on many years of sort of real world use and learnings. And there are definitely things we want to improve. And I think the sort of entity resolver is a good example of that. Because that's something that we don't currently support. We have a different model. That's one of the reasons I think Federation has been hard for people to understand in the past. So by taking away sort of those parts and better describing the overall reasoning, I hope that'll actually help people. Will help introduce people to it in a way that they may not have been in the past.
Yeah, that's the thing, especially with the node resolvers. If we if we bake in this pattern of node resolvers, it's very simple to grasp for people to start with. It's
yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that requires the node interface though. But I
no,
would say building
yeah.
on normal query root fields
Yeah.
instead of a generic entry point as we did. I think that makes things more understandable.
Yeah. What do you think, John?
I think I think it's a good approach. Yeah, it's going to be quite a bit of reading and reviewing from my part, but I think that's probably part of
Yeah,
the
at the moment it's
problem we're solving.
at the moment it's bits and pieces. Like this
Yeah.
is not a cohesive spec text, and it's not meant to be. That's why I also marked it as preliminary. I threw away whole sections of the Fusion spec. I copied over whole sections of the Apollo Federation spec. Also the directives. There needs to be a lot of work now into explaining them right and stuff like that. But this is basically what we do. That's why we have weekly meetings. Like let's see in 3 to 6 months, I think that we will be a lot further along.
Yeah, and it might actually be good to have a fresh set of eyes on this, because it keeps us honest, make sure that we explain things in a way that makes sense.
Yeah. Also for you, John, read the first thing, overview. If something is not clear, raise an issue, or even do a pull request if you think you can explain certain things better, and then we discuss it and see if we can reshape that.
Yeah, will do. Yeah, and I think the conceptual understanding under composition is going to be a bear, but I'll see what I can do.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, this chapter is completely not ready. Like also source schemas and subgraphics.
Okay.
Like all of this is basically just pieces of, like also the algorithms, I copied them over from the Fusion spec. They need to some align very well. That's why I kept the text. Others we will kick out, and we will go step by step, and then we have also others that we will introduce. So at this point, the spec is not implementable.
And maybe perhaps
this is all
not even
on
understandable.
the main branch.
Yeah.
This is all on the main branch. This is something I could open up right now, or is it a branch I should poke around on?
No.
It's the main branch, but it's in a separate schema, a separate repository.
Yes, the Composite Schemas working group.
No spec. I posted. Look in the chat.
Oh, it was a different URL. Oh, my bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I put it explicitly there because I didn't want to create too much hopes for people that then start. And having it there is kind of in the open. So we are working in the open. We have a repository in the open, and we end up also like with a clean history, where we don't have these commits where I add Martin and Michael in between. And we can
that makes sense.
work on this in just it's I made it very clear that it's not to be implemented with stage 0, so it should be all good. So okay, like Martin, I take for me, I will take what you sent me, I will merge it into the composition chapter.
Yeah,
and then we start with working our way through, and you can do pull requests. I think I will have it by tomorrow night. And then you can in between also just open issues or pull request or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I won't be able to work on it tomorrow anyway, so it's for the weekend and after. So tomorrow night would be perfect.
Yeah, awesome. And then we can make some progress on the composition, because this will be like source schemas and composition is a lot of work now.
Yeah.
But I have also Benji. He's also helping a lot on this. So he's also now chiming in here and there. So I think
Good to hear.
we will make good progress.
Would you consider it required reading to go through the Fusion spec that you mentioned?
So we didn't publish it because we didn't want to, like, I think, so we had already a lot of spec, but I think if we publish that, then we get kind of divided attention. And I want people to focus on this, and we will also for hot chocolate, we will implement this specification and go away from what we have done so far. Like it would be a bad thing if we end up in the community with 3 or 4 specs.
Yeah.
I mean, then we don't need a spec.
There's nothing better than adding a standard when you don't like the current one. So we'll get more standards.
Yeah, so
sure.
I think yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add the a link to the Federation documentation for John if he hasn't seen that yet.
I briefly looked, but I will definitely go look a little bit deeper this time.
Yeah, and I think we've made some improvements to the discussion as well. Like this is a good section, I think.
The one thing that you need to remove are all the business directives.
Yes,
like,
that's definitely out of scope. Yeah, but I don't think that's in this section. I think we've kept that a little bit separate. So, like authorization, for instance, is definitely out of scope. But we sort of currently describe that as based on Federation directives.
Yeah, the policy stuff and stuff. This you can know.
Yeah.
Know. Like, by the way, I looked like with Derek. So we are at the moment implementing with Derek together a new hot chocolate subgraph
great
provider. And like for the compose directive, have you ever considered calling it export directive?
I wasn't actually involved in that discussion. I don't know if that's something people have considered.
Because Compose, I think it's like when I talk to people, it's not a clear understanding what it does. If you think about composition and that, okay, it will be part of the composition, like from an implementation of Federation, it's understandable. But for a user, it's more like, what do I want to do? I want to export this or make it public. I just was...
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't think we're too happy with sort of the current form of that directive. Yeah. Anyway, at least we had some other ideas about metadata processing and filtering at some point. So
yeah, I was just I'm not happy with how it's at the moment is.
No, we needed something, I think, and this is where we landed on.
Yeah. Yes, I don't. It doesn't have anything because at some point we will have to think about the mechanism for this, because that is also a thing, as at least as I've perceived from the community, people use a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's actually another interesting point. Like, if we can get more input from the community, like concrete use cases are always helpful.
Yeah, I'm asking in the, like, we have a Slack channel with over 5,000 hot chocolate users. I'm asking there mainly, but like only a sub that is using Apollo Federation, but I'm trying to get the data from them. Like Kamel is often, I ask him often to query what they have in Hive and to get a sense of like how many times do people use this directive and stuff like that. It would be also good to have if you also could.
Yeah, I think we have some tooling for that some teams have used. So if there are any specific questions, I could sort of ask around and see what the current way of getting access to that
Exactly.
information.
Yeah. The moment we go into these things, it's always good to know, okay, how many users use actually a directive, and how many times is this directive used within each subgraph.
Yeah.
I have no concrete question now, but as soon as we go into like defining a new set of directives, it would be good to have these things.
Yeah.
But yeah, good. So for me, I'm quite good. We have the work cut out. Does anybody else
I think so.
have
Yeah.
something? Okay, I will ping you somewhere tomorrow night via email.
Yeah.
And then you can have go.
Sounds good.
Awesome. And John, if you have anything, just open issues. Don't feel shy.
I plan to drop in a review or two. Probably mostly questions, I imagine.
Yeah, but this is also good. Like if you ask questions or if you think you cannot, like at the moment, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on what we have as a directives. It's just our starting point. Basically, Martin and I decided on a set that we want to work on, but how they shape up or if we rename them is totally up for discussion.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Was a good meeting again.
Yeah. Definitely.
See you guys.
Well, thank you so much, and see you next week.
See ya.
Goodbye.